Aloha and welcome to Permission to Flourish, a podcast about choosing growth, joy, and purpose on your own terms. I'm your host, Jay Cornell, and I sit down with leaders, creatives, and everyday visionaries who's given themselves permission to pause, pivot, and pursue what truly matters. These conversations are real, heartfelt, and here to remind you, you don't need permission. Let's get to today's episode. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Permission to Flourish podcast. Today, my guest is Joey Chandler. Joey works with entrepreneurs and business owners to create alignment between their values, goals, plans, and action. This helps them go on and go after bigger goals and recover faster from defeats. I am so looking forward to interviewing Joey and what he has upcoming in his new book that he is currently working on. I am so excited to have Joey Chandler here with us today. Joey, thank you so much for saying yes and coming on to the podcast. My first question for you is, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are and what you do?
Well, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here. My name is Joey Chandler. I am a business consultant. I help people clarify and make use of their values so that they can achieve big goals. What I have found is that in this day and age where there's so much distraction and uncertainty and worry and concern, that having a big goal is really, really helpful because it just keeps you moving and it stops you from getting pulled in so many different directions. But anytime you set a goal, especially a big one, some sort of fear or doubt or worry comes up. And so I help people get past those doubts, make better use of their values so they can keep going towards their big goal. I have a 18-year-old son. I live in Reno, Nevada, and I like to ski and take photos.
I love that. That is so awesome. So, the podcast is called Permission to Flourish. When you hear that phrase or those words, what does it personally mean to you at this stage of your life?
I think it means the freedom and the courage to say what you want to say, like to go big. I personally, I've been exploring this idea of resolutions and setting big goals and putting that idea out there. And I haven't achieved as many goals as I would like. Like it would be much nicer if I was wildly, wealthy and super, I had more hair and super good looking and, everything was perfect. It feels like it would be easier to put out my message, but that's not where I'm at. So giving myself permission to flourish is permission to share the message, even if things aren't perfect in my own life.
Right? That's true. And, we always think that it has to be perfect, but it doesn't. It's just allowing ourselves just to keep going and just keep making those changes. Consistency is truly the key.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, consistency and clarity and confidence, all and creativity, a lot of C's
And
make a
I
big difference.
So true, so true. And I hear that you are working on a book about resolutions. Is that true?
Yes, it is. I was working on I was working on a book on values over the holidays actually, and I was going through the process, and part of my process is to create a large goal based off your values. And so I went through my own process and put it out. And what came up was to sell 1 million copies of my book. And that makes no sense at all because I hadn't even sold one. So like it made no sense. But I've learned to trust my gut when I have a goal that aligns with my values. I've learned to trust it, even if I don't know how to put it to use. And so I've over the past couple of months, I've been working on and just putting together a plan. And I realized that one thing that many millions of people struggle with every year are resolutions. And so I put out that big goal and I started to work on it. And the idea is I'm going to put out a book later this year on big goals and resolutions. And then the fun part that I didn't realize until I started doing this work was that I could do that actually every year. I could put out a book or do another version of the book every year, And to me, is just a great example of sometimes you have to come up with the idea. And if it aligns with you, then you can dive into it and figure things out. Because if I waited to have the perfect plan to put this together, I never would have done it because it literally makes no sense. But when I started to explore it with resolutions, like, oh, wait a minute, we can do this. And I'm finding resolutions incredibly fascinating because even though less than 10% of people actually fulfill on resolutions, we set them every single year. And and when I started to think about that, I realized that there must be something about starting over, starting new, beginning, starting fresh. That must be part of the human experience. Otherwise, we would have gotten rid of resolutions a long time ago because we're all so bad at them.
Yes,
And
so
so I've been
true.
working on my own resolutions, and one of them is to have a book written for later this year.
Oh, it's exciting. And as you're talking about resolutions, in your personal opinion as a professional, why do you believe resolutions fail for so many people? And with the book and the series that you're going to have coming out, do you see that this will help others pivot and make the change that is needed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the reason why our resolutions fail is because they're not aligned with our values. We are not clear as we could be personally on our own values. So then when we set a goal, like one of my resolutions is to read a book every month, to read one book a month. And before I before I did this work, that would have been like a good idea or something that I thought people should have done. But my values are connection, curiosity, and fun. And so I just started being like, how can I have a little fun with reading a book? And now now when I go for a run, I put on an audiobook, and I've been able to, and I think I've read 3 books now. So I'm ahead of the game. But I think our resolutions don't align with our values. We don't create a clear plan on how to achieve the resolution. And the big thing is that we don't have a recovery plan because we're going to miss a day. We're going to miss a week. I mean, heck, even a month. That is going to happen on any meaningful goal, any resolution. You're going to have an off amount of time. So you need to have a recovery plan that that you can use when life happens.
That is so valuable because a lot of, like you said, our resolution doesn't align with our values. And when you're helping your clients set their goals, what is the biggest question or that aha moment that you have found that has been consistent when they actually find or realize what their real goal really is?
There's a couple. One is it feels really natural, even though it's really big. It feels like it lands in your body, and any other number or any other goal or anything just doesn't feel right. So even if the goal is, you know, just something that makes no sense at all, if it lands right in your body, that's the right goal. So that's kind of surprising when people are like, "Wait a minute, this is my goal." And then the other really surprising part is when we work out a plan, because let's say you set a goal to, make $1 million in a year. We work backwards. We say, okay, if you want to make $1 million at the end of Q4, what do you need to do at the end of Q3 and the end of Q2 and the end of Q1? And so we work that backwards. And so then you have this, and that may take a few times, like it may not happen all at once, but once we get a plan, and and then you can start waking up every day saying, okay, if I do this one thing, that will go to the next thing, and that will lead to my plan in December. And so people get the sense of like, hey, I can do it. Like these resolutions that all of a sudden that were really big, that made no sense. When they work that plan backwards, they're like, wait a minute, I can do it. And that's really cool. And then I guess the third one is when they recover. They have a bad day, they have a bad week, and we go through the recovery process, and they're like, "Oh, I can, I can, again, it's always the sense of like, wait a minute, I can do this, as opposed to here's a big thing and I'm going to fail tomorrow.
Yes, I so true. And for someone listening who feels that they're stuck in their own woulda, coulda, shouldas, or their goals and their resolutions, and they just can't keep getting stuck, what would you want them to hear right now from you?
One is 100% not too late. We're recording this at the beginning of February, so you could easily set a resolution for this year. And the other thing to say is that your resolutions are important. The things that you set, even if you're listening to this midway through the year, if you set a resolution for this year and you take some actions, then you go into 2027 just even more powerfully. Like, can you imagine what it'd be like if you woke up on January 1st, 2027, and you knew that you could set resolutions and that you had a reasonable chance of making them happen? Like, personally, I think that is, I kind of look forward to that because it's going to change the way I feel about New Year's. So it's not too late. And the other part is that we just have to help them get clear on their values. We want to get them down to three, and then we start to explore how we can apply their values to their goals, and that will help them take a step and a baby step and a baby step, and eventually, with enough baby steps and a little bit of luck, they will at the very least move towards their resolution and learn much more about making it happen.
It sounds simpler than it actually is. It's the simple things that's the hardest things to accomplish. I know that because every year, like you said, we set resolutions and it's just not aligning with our value. So as you're writing this book and you're collecting stories from uh, individuals, who is the ideal person to contribute to the story in this book?
Right now, it's someone who has tried to take on a 10x goal, a moonshot goal, an impossible goal. Something they know what it's like to take on something big, but they failed at it. They've struggled and they got frustrated. Because what I have found and what I'm looking to share with people is that anytime you set a goal, you're going to have some fear or doubt. And it could be a small goal, like as soon as you set, I want to, read a book a month. Like there was a fear of mine, like, well, I didn't read a book last month, or,
Right.
I haven't read in a while. A fear or doubt is going to come up. And rather than trying to force those down or ignore them or power through them or go to therapy to try to make them go away, what I found is that if we acknowledge those fears, just, I'm not good enough, I don't have what it takes. We acknowledge those fears, then we can say, hey, what do my values say to do here? And so you give space to your fears because they're human and they're natural. You give space to them. And when you give space to them, you have a few moments where you can say, okay, what do my values say to do? And that will prompt curiosity and creativity and innovation. And you'll come up with some new ideas for reading. Like an example, my son, I was actually talking to him today, and he was like, I really want to get out of my comfort zone. He's 18 and he's taking a year off, and he's like, I really want to get out of my comfort zone. And we go through the process, and he's like, if I read more, because he's like, I've been hanging out on Instagram too much. He's bringing this up. Like he's bringing this up, and he's like, I haven't read a book since I don't even know when, and I was like, okay, well, how can we do this? And we go through the process, and one of his values is fun, and I said, well, what, if you were bringing some fun to reading books more, what might you do? And he said, if I read the book, kind of like, what's the name? Killian, the actor, basically said if I read the book like I was an actor, and I thought about how I could bring more of myself to this, and he just went off and he kind of explained, like And I was like, that's awesome. I never, as a dad, as a coach, I never ever could have come up with that suggestion. Not not in a million years. I still don't even know what that exactly means. But it landed for him and he's like, yeah, if I read this like I was an actor and I was exploring how I might bring myself to the actor and how I could learn. And you could see this brain where he was literally 10 minutes before he's like, I don't read. And we're doing this thing. And it's so fascinating when you bring your values, when you can get past the fears, bring your values, you just come up with ideas that are really interesting and most importantly, really applicable to you. Because one of the things that I've seen, and tell me if you tell me if you have this experience, you go out, you listen to you listen to a podcast, you read a book, you go to a workshop, and people give you these incredible ideas that are amazing. And you're like, oh, I'm going to do that. And then 2 days later, you've forgotten it. And I think that's because we want to do things our own way. And if you base things off of your values, you're going to come up with things that work for you in your own way. And then you're just a bit more likely to do it. Like, I don't know if my son's going to read, but I think this by far, this gives him the best chance of reading that in any conversation him and I have had in, quite a few years.
And it's the excitement that he has. So when he starts it, right? And again, the consistency, the starting is the hardest part. Once you start going, and it's funny because I do that. When I'm reading and I get bored, I try to put myself as the character and I read out loud, and it just makes it much more fun. And so you get more engaging in the book.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll totally share that with him because I don't
Yes.
do that. Like I had, like I said, it was just so awesome because I had no idea. I never could coach him. Like, that's so cool. And out of curiosity, what what does it provide for you to read the stories out loud?
For me, it puts, because, as a coach, a speaker, and all the other things that we do, right? You get to be yourself, but you also get to hear your voice, and you just get that clarity within yourself because you get so bogged down with helping everyone else. Sometimes you just need that break because we always talk about storytelling. I love to tell stories, but is my voice, how does it sound? How can I put myself into character? Especially if you've been in drama, right? You have to say the lines out loud, and you want to get into character with the book. Not every book, but there are some books that are just like, how can I make this book much more interesting? Because I want to finish it. I'm determined to do it. So
Interesting.
yeah, that's the way I do it and why I do it.
Oh, that's so. If it's okay, I totally want to share that with him because
Absolutely.
it is
Yes. And
perfect.
you
'Cause
have it on video.
yeah, yeah, and it's so perfect because I literally had no idea what he was talking about. Like, I just knew he was excited, so I'm like, yes. And now this is perfect. And I'll just say this is, I think, a good example. A lot of people say not to share your resolutions, not to talk about what you're going through and explore this. But I find that sometimes having conversations about what's going on, like, on podcasts is a great example. Sometimes you just learn things that you would not have ever learned had you kept it a secret.
Yes, and it's the little takeaways or the little nuggets that you weren't looking for that you're like so unexpected. Like, really? Someone else does that? It's like, yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
You're like, I'm not as insane as I think I am. Like, that's
yeah, nope, not at all.
that's
Yeah, and
great.
it doesn't matter what age, it's just how we feel. Sometimes it's just awesome that way. So as you're doing your book, how can people sign up to share their story or submit their stories to you?
You go to joeychandler.net is all the things. And I'm not so much looking for people just to share stories. I'm really looking for people that want to take on a big goal because there's a particular process that I'm taking people through. And so if people want to have a big goal for this year and they want a system that will help them move forward, because it's really is remarkable when we start to operate from our values rather than our fears that we can move forward. But if you go to joeychandler.net, you can get in touch with me and I will help people clarify their values, apply it to their goals, start to take action, and we see what happens.
Awesome. And where else can listeners connect with you?
I'm at Joey Chandler 70 on LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, pretty much everywhere. But LinkedIn, TikTok, and Facebook are my big handles.
Amazing. And before we close out this session, Joey, it was such a pleasure to meet with you, have this conversation. I'm looking forward to reading your book, and I will say it
Mhm.
out loud. And
Mhm.
if you need someone to do your audio, I don't mind. Just putting that plug in there. But before we wrap up, is there any last words that you'd like to share with the listeners?
I just want to say thanks. I really appreciate taking the time, and just to put it out there that yeah, your resolutions are important. They're valuable. They really do. When you start to say, "Here's my resolution, and here's what I'm going for," they really do provide the foundation for you to create something new. And like I said, I think that creating something new is really, I think, is part of us being human. And if we can get better at that, then we just have a better chance of taking on the variety of challenges that we have, in our personal life and our political life and our social life. We got some challenges, and I think people being able to take on the resolutions will help with that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joey.
Thank you.
Mahalo, and thank you so much for tuning into Permission to Flourish. If today's conversation spoke to you, please leave a review and share it with a friend who needs a reminder that they too are allowed to share and thrive. Visit permissiontoflourish.com if you're ready to share your own story or explore our publishing opportunities. You'll also find free resources and inspiration to help you say yes to your own flourishing journey. Until next time, keep flourishing.